Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with another in our series of boxed sets that still exist for some reason or another. And today's still existing boxed set is the Elgar edition, complete electrical recordings of Sir Edward Elgar. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's still around. Isn't that exciting? I guess people still buy it, particularly in the UK and maybe someplace else. Who knows? Actually, this is an extremely valuable historical set for a number of reasons. The first reason is that Elgar was possibly the first major composer who realized the importance of recording in preserving his take on his own music, his views on his own music. And that is really quite a special thing. It was followed up, of course, with like Stravinsky doing Stravinsky and other composers doing themselves. But Elgar was really one of the first, if not the first, to comprehensively document his oeuvre with a series of recordings. Now, of course, most of them sound terrible. There were acoustic recordings. These are the electrical recordings, which were made between around 1926 and I think 1933, somewhere in there. And they really do sound just dreadful for the most part. But that's okay. I mean, that's not the point. What do you hear in them? Well, that's the question. You obviously hear his way of handling tempi, his way of shaping a melodic line, his way of phrasing. You hear a certain limited amount of texture and dynamic range. The performances with soloists, for example, with Yehudi Menuhin in the violin concerto or Beatrice Harrison in the cello concerto, you hear the soloist, which is pretty good. And you get to hear some rather interesting singers from the pre-war era in the UK. So, all in all, it's valuable. And there's also some evidence, limited, but some, of performance practice. In other words, you get to hear portamento in the violins, which is always a nice, juicy thing to do. In fact, when Charles Mackerras made his recordings of the Elgar symphonies and other things, he listened to these recordings and wrote down and notated all of the bits of portamento in his score so he could tell his string players to do similarly. And you also get supposedly, some people claim to hear some approach to vibrato, which of course is nonsense, because you don't really hear string vibrato in an orchestra. You only hear it when it's missing, when the strings sound like crap and sound out of tune. But generally speaking, quantity and quality of vibrato in dim electrical recordings from the 1920s to 1933 or so is almost impossible to detect as such. You just hear the general string timbre. Needless to say, that has not deterred people from writing reams of nonsense about vibrato, which was obviously present in these performances. We know it was from all kinds of other anecdotal and documentary evidence. But the evidence of our ears is not going to give away the game in these recordings in terms of the details, the finer details. Anyway, we don't need to get into that. What we do need to do is talk about what's in here. You've got, let's see, how many CDs is this? I think 9. 9 CDs of Elgar doing Elgar himself, which is really, most of his work. And, it's quite a legacy. There are a lot of excerpts of things. The large choral works aren't here. But let's just talk about what we get, and we'll see what happens. First, Symphony No. 1 with the London Symphony from 1930. It's actually a fine performance. Elgar was not the best conductor of his own work. Most composers are not the best conductors of their own work. If they were, there would be no need to write it down. If they could just record it and forget about it. In fact, most composers, it seems to me, when they play their own work, are rather sort of just straight ahead, no nonsense, not particularly imaginative, usually rather swift in tempo, not terribly sentimental, at least in the Romantic period. It's very, very rare to find composers who could really conduct their own work effectively. Benjamin Britten could do it. Leonard Bernstein obviously could do it. But most others are best leaving it alone. And Stravinsky was so-so. And Elgar was so-so. He had his moments. But let's see. So there's Symphony No. 1 with the LSO, Falstaff, also with the LSO from 1932. It's one of the better, actually, recordings in this set. Some of these things were recorded in Kingsway Hall, some of them in Queen's Hall, some of them in Albert Hall live. Oh my God. And in some cathedral somewhere, which is not the best place to be. Then we have Symphony No. 2. This is one of the earlier ones. This is from 1927, and you get a extra piece of the first cut of the rondo, the third movement, and a little rehearsal sequence where Elgar's voice is very dim and hard to detect. Now, the second symphony is a bit of a scramble, I think, especially that rondo, and it's where you really hear the deficits in the recordings. So much of Elgar is rich, juicy texture. I mean, he's only got two harps plonking away, and you've got very, very intricate string writing normally, and his percussion parts, soft bass drum and soft snare drum and tambourine in the rondo. You don't hear any of that. It's all inaudible, basically, or dimly audible. The balances are just totally screwed up, and there's nothing you can do about it. But it does, I think, give you a very good sense of the shape of the piece. The ensemble sometimes comes close to falling apart. That's what happens in these performances. Some people just love them. They love them for the historicalosity of it all. But I want to hear the music. And if you want to hear the music, you have to listen to other performances. I do think quite often people get familiar with the music, and then they go back to these historical performances knowing the music, and they can sort of imaginatively fill in what's actually missing on the disc itself. But that's cheating, because it's just not really there. It's all in your head. So anyway, but the second symphony is there. Then we get, the Dream of Gerontius. Yes, the Dream of Gerontius, which is the most magnificent music set to the most appalling words. Oh, is there ever a more horrible poem set to music than the Dream of Gerontius? I don't know. What do we get here? You get the prelude, you get some stuff. Rescue him, O Lord. Yeah, right, he needs rescued. And then you get the praise to the holiest, which is fun to have. And you get two bits of the Dream of Gerontius, and we get Take Me Away. That's after the fried soul. You know what happens? The soul gets fried. He goes to get judged, and he only for an instant, and there's this giant zap. It's a wonderful percussive zap with the tam-tam part marked vibrando. And then the tenor querulously, who's the dead soul of Gerontius, because he's just been fried. So then the fried soul sings, "Take me away," and he gets shipped off to purgatory to do his time, presumably before, getting his reprieve and sent back up to heaven. One of the problems with Gerontius, aside from the absolute horrendousness of the text, is that the best part is what they call the Demon's Chorus. And, most choruses are the name of the chorus is the first line of the text. It's usually, and he shall purify, or, worthy is the Lamb, or for the glory of the Lord. They take the first line. That's the name of the chorus. But you can't do that for the Demon's Chorus. Why? Because the first line is low-born clods, which sounds much better with an English accent. Low-born clods. Low-born clods of brute earth. Yeah, right. I really think they should call it low-born clods. Anyway, that's all a digression, because it's not in here at all. It's such a pity. It's really a pity. But you get two bits of excerpts from Gerontius, and the fun thing is the alto who sings the Angel Margaret Balfour. She's one of those super duper high octane British oratorio singers, and there's nothing quite like it around anymore. It's the that wonderful, Anna Russell, the large British contralto with a voice like a foghorn. Yes, that's Margaret Balfour. And then there's, all the other people. And we get some bits of the Music Makers at the Three Choirs Festival and the LSO. This is recorded live at Hereford Cathedral in 1927. Ooh, boy. Okay, then we get the Enigma Variations from 1926. It's like the earliest thing here. And so it's one of the dimmer sounding ones. And boy, it's fascinating to hear Elgar's take on the Enigma Variations. Nimrod, which, Bernstein spreads out to like 20 minutes, takes 2 minutes and 30 seconds here, which is like unbelievably fast. I think somehow the truth of the matter lies somewhere in between. But there you go. And the Violin Concerto, the famous one with Yehudi Menuhin. Now, I may be wrong. I mean, I may be. But I think Elgar's Violin Concerto is his greatest work. I think it's one of the all-time great violin concertos. I need to do a separate talk on it, but it's a bit of a project to put that one together. It's an amazing piece of music. It's also, I think, really the longest violin concerto in the repertoire that gets played, that's sort of in the repertoire. It kind of hovers on the edges. It's about 50 minutes long. It is a big sucker of a violin concerto. It really is. But it's an incredible piece. The Wand of Youth, Suites 1 and 2, the Nursery Suite, the Severin Suite. These are all fun and nice to have and charming and delightful light music. Then we're already on compact disc 6, by the way, I think. Yeah, are we? Did I miss anything? So I make sure I didn't miss anything. No, we're all fine. We're fine. You get number 6 is Land of Hope and Glory with Margaret Balfour. Land of Hope and Glory. Whatever that is, I don't know. It's wonderful. And it comes from the Misty Ages. That's the epilogue from the Banner of St. George. Then you get the National Anthem, arranged by Elgar. You get a lot of things like that. You get the Civic Fanfare and National Anthem earlier on. Elgar did not write the National Anthem, but, they want you to think he did. And then we get Croft's O God, Our Help in Ages Past. And then let's see what else. We get the Meditation from the Light of Life, which is excruciatingly dull. Another one of those early choral works. He wrote these choral pieces before Enigma. There's a huge body of choral work, some of which, like Caractacus, is really quite good, and some of which, and the Black Knight's kind of fun, and then some of it is... And the Light of Life is one of those torturously saccharine, droopy, dippy, sacred things that no one plays for a good reason. And then we get 3 characteristic pieces, and the Chanson de Nuit and the Chanson du Matin, and the 3 Bavarian dances, which are charming. People should play those more often. They're really a nice little suite. And then, Elgar's truly greatest masterpiece, which is the March of the Mughal Emperors from the Crown of India suite. Oh, how I love that, because it uses both a tam-tam and a gong, and Elgar is the only guy who does it. All the other recordings just use a tam-tam, and they assume they mean the same thing, but they don't. They don't. In my talk about the March of the Mughal Emperors, Elgar's greatest work, I discussed that in detail. So you get the Crown of India suite, and you get the Fantasia and Fugue in C minor, the Bach arrangement, which is fabulous Bach arrangement. Oh my God, is that fun. The only reason it doesn't get played very often is because it's very difficult. That fugue is tough. We did it. We did it in my community orchestra. I asked them to do it, and they did it. And wow, was that a blast. It is the most garish Bach orchestration. It's completely vulgar. It makes Stokowski seem like the king of refinement and restraint. It's marvelous. Marvelous. Then we get some overtures. We get Froissart. We get Cocaine. And In the South. And the interludes from Falstaff, even though we already have Falstaff. And then the Cello Concerto, as I mentioned, with Beatrice Harrison. And then disc 8, we have the Minuet from Beau Brummel, Rosemary, Salut d'amour, another minuet, the Serenade lyrique, May Song, and Carissima, and the Minuet from Beau Brummel. Again, boy, you get a lot of that. 5 piano improvisations, played by Elgar himself at the keyboards, and there he is, tinkling the ivories, and the Pomp and Circumstance marches. Yo, baby! These date from, 26, 27, and 30. They were recorded in different bits. They only became like a set much later. Elgar did them all separately. And then you get Land of Hope and Glory, introduced by Elgar himself. Isn't that exciting? And then the Prelude to the Kingdom. By the way, I think his best choral work is the Apostles. I don't think it's Gerontius. I really think the Apostles is his best choral work. It's a fabulous piece. Then we get 3 more Pomp and Circumstance marches again, 1, 2, and 4, and another Cocaine. These with the BBC Symphony Orchestras, and the Serenade, the String Serenade, the Elegy. There's no introduction in Allegro here, is there? No, I don't see it. And then we have an appendix. The appendix is the 2 interludes from Caractacus, conducted by Lawrence Collingwood, supervised by Elgar via telephone from Marlbank, Worcester. I'll bet that was some session, There he is on the phone saying, No, you moron! I said Allegro! And then we have 2 recordings of Minna. Now, what is Minna? Well, Elgar had 3 dogs. I think their names were Marco, Minna, and Meg, or something like that. And Minna was one of his dogs. And he wrote a delicious little waltz. It was his last completed work, although he didn't finish the orchestration. And it's recorded here twice by J. Ainsley Murray and Hayden Wood. And it's very interesting, actually, because the first recording of it was done, and they sent it off to Elgar, and he wrote back and said, "Oh, thank you so much." His daughter actually wrote back, whatever her name was. Carapace was his daughter. Her name was something like that. Carapace, anyway, Caris, I don't know. So she wrote back, and she said, "Oh, Dad was so thrilled with the recording of Minna, and he just wanted me to give you a couple comments." He proceeds to rip it to shreds and say, "Under the circumstances, please don't release this recording because so much has gone wrong. Sorry to have to give you the criticisms." It's marvelous, just so marvelous. So there are 2 recordings of Minna the dog here, and then the Coronation March with Sir Landon Ronald conducting. And that, my dear friends, is the complete Elgar electrical recordings, and electric they are. Really seriously, though, no, let's not be serious. You have to love Elgar, and you have to love historical recordings, or be a student of early recording or performance practice to really want this set. But I have always found it to be very interesting as a reference when listening to later recordings of the same music, because while the composer's way is by no means definitive, not a bit, it's nice to know what he wanted and nice to know what satisfied him. I also think, just as people who are fans of historical recordings sometimes hallucinate what's on them, even though it's not, I think that for composers, it's enough just to hear it. They don't need to make any special case because the music is in them. It's in their head. And so when they hear it, they have all the feeling and imagination and everything that went into it, they hear. Whether or not that's what's actually getting played, or whether or not the recording actually reproduces what they heard in their soul when they first made the recording. And so that may be one of the reasons that most performer-led recordings are just so ordinary. Composer-led recordings are just so ordinary. I don't know. Maybe you have some suggestions as to why that's the case. So Elgar's recordings of himself are by no means the last word, but they are definitely interesting for any number of reasons, and hardcore collectors will be very happy to know that this sucker is still out there. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.